Canada is in a literal depression as cities declare emergencies over food insecurity. This is just something that you would not imagine happening in a Western country, yet it is happening in Canada. So let's get into exactly what's going on and what we've seen happen recently, which is Kingston becomes latest Ontario city to declare food insecurity as an emergency. So Kingston is a city in Ontario, and they've just one of many more to declare an emergency over food insecurity. Councillor Greg Ridge said St. Vincent de Paul, which I think is a church, provided 18,347 meals in 2019, and in 2024 it was 46,997. I mean, that is just so sad and just kind of shows you what a dire state Canada is in. And if you just think it's an isolated case of this one city, as we're going to get into, it is many more cities that are declaring these food insecurity emergencies. And they even say that right here. So it's requesting that the federal and provincial governments establish a guaranteed livable basic income. So this is literally another argument for UBI. I just don't understand how these central planners think that just by increasing the basic income that is going to somehow help people afford food. It just doesn't work like that. It's so obvious. You're just robbing Peter to pay Paul. And they also talk about having price controls, a lot of these central planners, which just depletes the supply. And basically, obviously, if you've only got a certain amount of money circulating, like I said, if you just increase it through deficits and debt, which is what the government does, that's new money into the money supply. You're just going to increase the cost of goods and services if you're not producing any more goods and services. The fact is, we need to produce more in order to actually bring up the standard of living for everybody. We need to be more productive. But the fact is, investment is just completely going the opposite way in Canada, which is very, very sad. And it's because of the policies of governments over the past decades. It's not just the past 5-6 years. It's been far longer than that. So Kingston becomes the third Ontario city to pass such a motion, following on the heels of Mississauga in November 2024 and Toronto in December. So two biggest cities in the country there declaring a food insecurity emergency. I mean, like I said, it's a depression. Whether people want to accept that or not is entirely up to them. It is literally a depression when the people in your population can't afford to feed themselves. I mean, come on. And we're not talking about one or two. We're talking about a lot. So in a release, Mississauga Mayor Carolyn Parrish noted her city has the fastest growing rate of food bank use in Ontario. It's just absolutely crazy. And you know, we talk all the time on this channel about the real estate bubble and the debt bubble, and it has massive consequences. And these are some of those consequences. Here we have the same thing. Mississauga City Council declares food insecurity as an emergency. This was November 13th, 2024. And that actually happened. Everything's linked below. And obviously inflation is part of the issue here. You've seen inflation that has gone up significantly. However, the Bank of Canada is reducing interest rates right now and claiming that they've won the fight against inflation. But if that's the case, then why do we keep seeing food bank volumes rise and rise and rise? And it's because of that deteriorating economy that I've been pounding the table on over the past couple of years. It is really, really bad. There is a recession. We're now going into full-scale depression if we're not in one already. And whether people want to admit it to themselves or not, it's a different thing entirely. But that is the reality when you look in the numbers. Obviously, you could be earning over six-figure salary and you could be just all right. You could own your home outright cash and not have many expenses, and you could be absolutely fine claiming everyone else is absolutely fine, which is just not the case. And that's what people tend to do. They tend to live in their little bubble and they don't actually realize what's going on the outside, and then they get broken into or something happens to them and then they realize pretty quickly what is going on. So this article came out of Maclean's as well, which is just telling of the times. I mean, it feels like people should be writing books about what is going on in Canada right now, because seriously, it is a depression. So why are Canada's food banks collapsing? So we've gone from food bank usage at record highs, it's already at record highs, to food banks are now outright collapsing because they can't even support the amount of people that are going to them. So astronomical grocery prices, troubling high numbers of people are flocking to food banks to feed their families. Last March alone, 2 million Canadians visited food banks, a staggering 90% increase from 2019, and the most recent figures estimate that 12,000 new users access them every single month. Food banks aren't just frequented by unhoused and precariously employed folks anymore. Now, 1 in 5 users has a steady job. And we've seen in Toronto, I've covered articles where people have got 6-figure plus incomes in Toronto, but the cost of living is so insane there that, yeah, they're having to go to a food bank. And there are people taking advantage as well. Obviously, if you increase the volume of people that are going to food banks, you're bound to have more and more people that take advantage of that situation that don't really need to be there, but karma will eventually catch up with them. But it's just crazy when you actually think about this going on, because Canada has ramped up immigration to the absolute maximum over the past couple of years, and it's just had devastating impacts because the economy cannot support all that immigration. I've never seen such a stupid policy implemented in my whole life. And looking at politics in the past, reading through history of what's happened in Canada, a policy like this. And there is some kind of good news, at least, which is happening, which is rent prices keep dropping. But this is kind of like robbing Peter to pay Paul as well, because, okay, rent prices go down for the tenants, but then on the backside of that, the landlords are completely screwed because the price of their debt isn't going down enough. And many of them have actually accumulated massive amounts of debt through negative amortization. Like, they're just so far in the hole that they're never getting out of it. So again, like, those people are then in trouble. And those are the people who are going to be more and more in trouble. And don't get me wrong, it's because of their poor financial decisions that they're in that situation that they're in. You're just shifting around where the problem is without really fixing it. And the problem, the root cause of the problem, is just a terrible economy. That's why all these things are happening. And then the investment executive, they put out this article as well, which is really interesting. So as rates fall, household debt growth picks up. And you just want to see what is actually picking up. Well, here it is. So total household debt passed the 3 trillion threshold in October, driven by accelerated mortgage borrowing, according to new data from Statistics Canada. The National Statistics Agency reported that household credit liabilities rose by 13 billion in the month to just over 3 trillion. But get this, in October, the 0.4% increase in total debt was led by borrowing backed by real estate. So this is like derivatives, essentially, which is home equity lines of credit. Now, the fact is, we know how dangerous these types of products are, and it accounted for $11.2 billion of the total, so not a small amount by any stretch of the imagination. And obviously, they're saying that this is happening because rates are coming down, but if you look historically at the picture of that, that's not really the case. Why this is happening is more to do with the fact that the debt levels are so insane right now that people have to take on more debt to basically reorganize their debt and also try and pay down the higher interest rate debt. I mean, it's just a game of musical chairs, essentially. People are just shifting their liabilities around, and that's what's happening. And then you've got more and more people that are always going to be taking out credit, mortgages, buying houses, etc. But we know that first-time home buyers entering the market is at a real low point, as investors entering the market is at a real low point as well, which is just showing you how the bubble there is imploding. And if you were just wondering where kind of Canada stacks up on a scale in terms of government spending as a percentage of GDP, it's 41.5%. So it's a huge number that Canada spends, and this is part of GDP. So the government is making up nearly half of the economy, and these central planners who say UBI is the answer just basically says that government is just going to continue increasing, and that just would mean that government is more and more percentage of GDP in terms of their spending, which is just going to be absolutely disastrous. But you know, Canada is in a huge crisis right now. The tariffs, the depression that's already going on right now, there are just so many things swirling around that are just not good. And obviously if the government retaliates with more tariffs, that's just going to lead to an even worse outlook. When you really think about it, it's like two warriors who are cutting off their limbs whilst they're preparing to fight each other. That's what a tariff in a trade war is. There's no winner, and the way I see it is it's more like they're just trying to add on a sales tax, and because a lot of lay people, they just hear tariff and they don't hear tax, the alarm bells aren't going off, when it's practically the same thing. If Trump is going to put a tariff of 10% on all imports to the US, it might as well be a 10% federal sales tax. It's just people don't see it that way. But anyway, that's why channels like me are around to say things like that. Anyway, I want to thank you so much for watching this. If you've enjoyed this video, I'd highly recommend that you check out this video here. If you want to help support the channel and get the best VPN out there, go to expressvpn.com/marketmania. I will see you in the next one. Take